just was having some quick thoughts on ammo mechanics. On account of I'm writing a game that features guns quite heavily, most characters are kind of assumed that most of the time they're going to be engaging with the enemies by shooting at them. A core aspect of the gunning fantasy, both in action movies and stories and what have you, is the management of ammunition. Ammunition is such a big part of the idea of using firearms, and in the war and combat type scenarios, like managing ammunition is such a big thing. You don't want to go without it. But at the same time, tracking individual bullets, that's kind of a lot of hassle. Because A, it's a number that's going to be changing every time you do a thing with that gun. So it's a lot of upkeep. And two, you then have to say, like, well, how many bullets did I shoot when I shot? You know, if it's a fully automatic weapon, or if, you know, a turn represents a series of attacks, you know, bam, 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 that could all be one attack. So you have to then, if you're going to be tracking individual bullets, you then have to know exactly how many bullets a character is firing every time they do an offensive action with that weapon. And it's not just like, is it semi-automatic? Is it fully automatic? You have to take into account, like, how effective are these attacks? What can you accomplish with them? How many bullets does it take to do that? And it's kind of a huge headache. Some games do it that way. I'm positive some games do it that way, where you're tracking every piece of ammunition and you make X number of shots on your turn based on what kind of weapon you're using and maybe some combination of character abilities. I don't think that's really an ideal way to do it. And I think a lot of people kind of naturally understand that that's not a great way to do it. It's very fiddly. And the tracking of ammunition in this way doesn't really feel like it's adding much to the story. It does create those moments where you go, I'm out of ammo, time to reload, which is really the goal. You're trying to get to there. Like, reloading and maybe running out of ammo needs to be a thing for gun-based combat fantasies. But I think there are better ways to get there. Most notably, I've had a few ideas that I don't necessarily know if any of these are going to make it into Code World. I'm still working out how I want to do that, because I do want reloading and running out of ammo to be a thing that happens. But it is, I think, not a thing that, it's not a thing that I want to just sort of like shove a mechanic in there and call it done. I want to make sure that I'm using a mechanic that is A, fun to use, and B, creates the kind of fantasy that I'm looking for. And we'll get into that a bit more in just a moment. One of the ideas that I had that I'm pretty sure I'm not going to end up using, but I think could work for a different game, is a usage die. This is used quite extensively in the game The Land of Eam, which I've been playing a campaign of for the last year or so, actually. Food and money actually has usage dice. And so every time you consume food or you spend money, you roll a die, and on a 1 or a 2, you get something back. Either like the food is not completely expended, or like if you are spending a bag of silvers, you might get a bag of coppers back. Sorry, I think I missaid that. On a 1 or a 2, you don't get something back. On anything higher than that, you do get something back. So different items can have different usage dice, you know, all the way up to like a D12. And then it goes down to a D6. So something like that for ammo, I think, could work really well. Different guns having different usage dice, which you'd probably call ammo dice. And like every time you attack with them, you roll an ammo die to see if you expended your clip for that shot. It can create issues with weapons that have like a very discrete number of shots. For example, shotguns. If you're not using a clip, like you're using just like a double barrel shotgun, you have 2 shots at most. And so a usage die doesn't really make much sense there. And then there's issues where maybe you're using like, a small arms and you go a whole fight without ever running out of ammo just because the ammo die says you don't need to reload this turn. And I think that can create some minor continuity issues that I think I'm mostly okay with just sweeping under the rug and saying it doesn't matter. But the other side of this is that if it takes, say, like an action to reload, you run the risk of someone having to reload after every shot. And if that is not an assumed part of your action economy and your power balancing, that's a problem. And so leaving it up to a random chance, I think, doesn't feel particularly good in a way that can just happen every turn or not happen at all. I think random chance is fine. And in fact, most of my ideas for how to handle ammo are some sort of random chance. But I think it should be something that has mitigation for happening every turn versus not happening at all. Like, I think it should resist either of those two extremes in some way. And not just with the odds. Because like the chance of rolling a 1 or a 2 on a d6, like, it's not extraordinarily high, but it's certainly high enough to happen. If you go, say, 3 or 4 turns in a given fight and you're rolling a 1 or a 2 each time, like, that's not extraordinarily unlikely. I can do that. I probably would, knowing me. I have terrible dice luck. So that was the one thing. Another thing is, and this one I think I'm going to try this as my first solution for Code World, is as a consequence of an action. Now, if you've played Blades in the Dark, you're probably familiar with the idea of consequences. Something bad that happens as a part of your roll if you don't roll well enough. Now, Code World handles consequences a little bit differently, usually through something called an adversary die, which I'm not prepared to explain yet. But basically, the idea is that if the adversary die rolls to make a consequence, one of those consequences can be running out of ammo. And different weapons might have different different threat levels that need to be met before they can run out of ammo. So guns with, like, smaller guns with a lot of ammo, they can't run out of ammo right away. But larger guns that run through ammo really, really fast, they might run out of ammo the first couple of times this happens. So, there's certain amounts of mitigation that you can allow for there. It also is mitigated by the fact that the GM, in a lot of these like consequence-based systems, the GM decides which specific consequence happens if consequences are going to happen. And so they can decide, yeah, you've been shooting your gun kind of a lot, you're out of ammo now. Or they can say, well, you just reloaded on your last turn, so running out of ammo again this soon doesn't make any sense. We'll do a different consequence. So I like that. And that's probably what I'm going to try first and see how I like that. And I certainly like that better than tracking individual ammo. Another like side idea that I think probably wouldn't work that well for what I'm trying to do for Code World specifically, but I probably would do it in other types of games, is something, I think Band of Blades does something kind of like this, where your ammunition is not tracked bullet by bullet, but it is tracked like attack action by attack action. So like, I have enough ammo, however many shots that may be, I have enough ammo for three attack actions before I have to reload. Maybe that's 20 bullets, maybe that's 30 bullets, maybe that's 100 bullets, maybe it's 3 bullets. But it is 3 attack actions, and we hand wave the exact number of bullets before I have to reload. And I think that kind of like cuts a nice middle ground between tracking individual bullets and the much more abstract, like, roll to see if you run out of ammo and you have no idea if that's coming. This, you can see like, all right, I've attacked twice. If I attack one more time, I'm going to have to reload before I can attack again. And it gives the player that sort of agency over like whether or not they think that attacking again is a good idea, given that they won't be able to attack again the following turn. They'll have to reload. So managing your ammo, and then like presumably you could take an action to reload and reset that track if you find that you're in a moment where you have some breathing space there. And I kind of like that. that it creates a sort of tactical option of like, do I need to take a turn to reset? And I probably wouldn't make it just like a reload action. I probably have it be the sort of like all-purpose like a refresh action of some sort. Trail of the Behemoth has a refresh action that lets you get rid of like status effects, and if there were guns in that setting, I would say that doing that action also reloads your gun. It's that sort of like, I'm taking a step back, I'm gonna like maybe heal up a bit, try to get rid of some status effects, and I'm gonna reload my weapons. That's sort of like all-purpose, I'm resetting for battle. And that would be a way to cover that. I kind of like that idea, actually. I think it's really potent. It does a good job of straddling the line between like managing resources and not being too fiddly, you know, not being too paperworky. But it also gives the player knowledge about upcoming negative statuses, that negative status being out of ammo. It doesn't really work that well. The issue then is that you either have to periodically spend like 1 out of every 3 or 4 or 5 turns, or however often it is, not doing the fun offensive actions, which is usually, in my opinion, something you want players doing all the time, if possible. Especially in like an action-oriented game, i.e. the ones usually using weapons with multiple shots. Your semi-automatic and your automatic weapons, you probably are doing a game where players should be in the action all the time, and saying that every so often you have to step back and just functionally skip your turn. Like, you're gaining benefits, yes, but you're not pushing your team towards victory, and that doesn't necessarily feel too good. So I think that's the big disadvantage of that. But I mean, that's kind of a disadvantage of reload systems in general, isn't it? So how are we going to get through that? Or how are we going to circumvent the feel bad of not being able to shoot? One thing is giving the player a lot of options for recovering, or for like, you know, having more weapons, or so like, instead of reloading, I'm just going to draw another weapon and be fine with it. Having a lot of those allows the player to sort of like circumvent the bad luck of running out of ammo, by spending like gear slots, if your game does that. And that's kind of, excuse me, something that I'm looking at doing for Code World, is that if you are out of ammo, you can reload, or you can just like mark another weapon on your sheet, and you have a very limited number of items that you can mark, but you can use one of those very limited items to mark another weapon and just draw that and keep going. And so there's like a cost between, like, you know, do I want to spend my action to like reload and reset, or do I want to spend some of my limited gear to ignore that and keep going? And so that's something that I'm looking at solutions for how to get around. I don't want reloading to feel like a wasted turn, you know. So I think incorporating the reload action with other things, like maybe if you take the assist action with someone else, you get to reload for free. Like, that's, or like reload can be incorporated into like many different actions, you know, a sort of reset action, assist, or what have you, like whatever, basically, as long as you are not going forward and spending ammo, basically, you're not attacking enemies, you're not doing the offensive thing, I think allowing you to reload in that would be a good idea. So you can still participate in the scene, you just can't be firing your gun all the time. You have to do something else. It doesn't necessarily have to be defensive. It doesn't have to lack like the objective-oriented mindset, but it does have to be not shooting. You have to do something other than shooting, and you can reload as part of that action. I think I like that actually a lot. That way, it does feel like a bit of a penalty, especially if you are a gun-oriented character. It does feel like a penalty to not be able to shoot, to not be able to do your default method of interacting with enemies. But at the same time, it doesn't stop you from meaningfully engaging in the scene. I think I like that a lot. So yeah, those are my thoughts on reloading mechanics for firearms in tabletop RPGs.